Hello everyone, this is Alex, and okay, I know we've just begun the month of November, but I had one last Halloween kind of themed video that I want to share with you. And of course, I wanted to talk about, so it's become a thing now for me to watch Penny Dreadful during the Halloween season, and that got me thinking, I've already done my review, but I haven't really talked about individual episodes. So I thought for my last Halloween video this year to talk about my top 10 favorite Penny Dreadful episodes. And if you want to watch my Penny Dreadful review, I will put the link below so you can go and watch that. And I will try to keep spoilers to a minimum for those who haven't seen it, but it might give you a good idea of what the show's about and sort of things, but I'll try to keep my spoilers to a minimum. So with that said, let's take a look. Okay, so this was the season 3. I was hyped. I was hyped for season 3 because of the cliffhanger that season 2 left us on, and I'll talk about that later. But it was, and I remember when the trailer came out, and it was just, I was so excited. And the first episode of season 3 did not disappoint. I think that what was interesting about this particular episode to me was you are seeing the cliffhanger at the end of season 2 is more on the sort of the characters are kind of spread out in this one, almost to different countries, and it was one of those things where, like, what's going to happen to them? We know these characters are so strong as a group, and now they're separated. I mean, especially like what's going to happen to Vanessa, especially from what happens at the end, so I won't give anything away. And the interesting thing about the day that Tennyson died was just seeing, you see the characters at pretty much at their lowest point. I think all the characters, not just Vanessa, but Malcolm and Ethan and Frankenstein and Caliban and things like that. And so, and that was always interesting. And I think it's just seeing that sort of lifting up of like, okay, this is sort of the idea of what we're going to get in this season, and sort of, and I think, and I also wanted to put this one on the list because season 3 had, I don't know if they had a different director of photography or something, because I don't know, for me, season 3 looked differently compared to the first 2 seasons, but honestly, I really liked this change. I mean, maybe it was showing the change that was happening in the show, and so I think it was worth it. And I think, but it's just seeing them separated and at the lowest point, and seeing like what's gonna come, and it was definitely exciting. It sort of started the show on a quite quiet level, and in some cases I think that worked brilliantly. So there you go. Okay. This episode was interesting for me because, like I said, from the day that Tennyson died, is that this was an episode that, for me, my emotions were sort of all over the place. The great thing about Penny Dreadful, and what I absolutely love about these characters and makes me want to watch even more, is the fact that not all of them are good and not all of them are bad, and you sort of get the sense of who's more worse off than other characters, but in this one it kind of mixes it up a bit. And this especially goes for, characters like, like Lily or Malcolm, and, characters like that. I'm trying to remember who else, and it's an interesting, for me this was like the sort of turning point from the day that Tennyson died, and you slightly see more of like motivations and stuff, and it's kind of like, okay, at first I was against you, but I'm slightly seeing where you're coming from, and it sort of turned the tables for me a little bit. And I think visually it was absolutely amazing. Like the climax involving Ethan, and just the state that he was in at a point, and also, and that kind of goes for Vanessa as well, with the climax that she has at the end of that episode with Dr. Sweet. And it's one of those things where it's like, the great thing about Penny Dreadful is that it plays with your logical side and your emotional side. It's like, oh, look, I know that this is wrong, but oh god, I want these for these characters because I love them. So, and I think for season 3, that was probably the episode that did it, and it did it in such a visual, stunning way. I mean, it's such a wonderful looking show. I mean, it feels like I'm watching a film half the time, so I think that's all I have to say. Okay, talk about an episode that plays with your logical side and your emotional side. Above the Vaulted Sky, definitely, oh my goodness. I think the reason why this one had ended up on the list is because of the climax, i.e. the sex montages. I don't know how else to put it, but yeah, it's the sex montages, let's just say that. I think it's just because you're watching these, you know, different couples and all that kind of thing, and it's just, again, your logic side's going, is this right? But your emotions is just like, but you know, and it really plays and toys with your emotions, and I love it. And you know, and oh god, it's just, I think it was one of the most on the edge of your seat type climax. I mean, it just kept building and building and building, and not just with the love scenes, but also with a specific character kind of hallucinating, and they're, oh my goodness, this wonderful moment when they're hallucinating, excuse me, and you see these 2 tombstones at the end of her bed, and suddenly the corpses rise up, and it was like something out of the whole horror movie. I was just like, oh my god, this is brilliant. You know, I was on the edge of my seat the whole time, and it was just, oh! So I think, you know, I think it was probably, for me, the best climax that the show ever had, and considering that the show has a lot of good climaxes and good sort of cliffhangers, I think that's saying something, so Above the Vaulted Sky, it's definitely memorable. So, I've put this one on the list because... Okay, the reason why this film... see what I mean? It makes me think of a film more long. This show kept bringing me back, especially for the first season, because again, we're only at episode 3 here, is because it is just... I had no idea what kind of show I was going into. It looked very dark and mysterious to me, and it had Eva Green in it, and I was like, okay, I'll give it a go. And the thing that I was kind of like, about it, the first episode, but the thing that drove me back was the fact that you find out that Frankenstein is a part of the story, and I was like, it ends on that cliffhanger. It's just like, yep, this is Frankenstein, and I was like, oh shit, oh, this is gonna be so much different than I thought it was gonna be, and I was just like, yes! And I think Resurrection is the episode that really focuses on the Frankenstein story, and it does it in such a kind of different way from other visual adaptations we have. I mean, obviously, you know, I love the Boris Karloff movie. I absolutely love it, and but in Resurrection they kind of make it look like it's the way that it was written. So, like, when I was watching the scene when the monster is brought to life, I was like, this is how I imagined the novel, because it's just that, you know, you kind of get both sides of the argument. It's like Victor is absolutely terrified, but at the same time the monster is terrified because he has no idea what he's doing, and he's just begging for help, and and Victor has no idea what he's doing, and it's just like, you know, and so you understand why Victor runs out. Why he didn't come back was stupid, but you know, and just the development of the monster's character, so the way he learns, the way he reads, you know, the fact that he's now, you know, obsessed with poetry and his experience with human behavior, yes, and you know, and what he wants from Victor, and honestly, and this is coming from someone who's read the book, for those of you who have read the book and you're thinking, oh, is this just, don't, honestly, I love the Frankenstein book, and this was such a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful homage to it, and I absolutely loved it, and it just wanted me to, because they did it in such a way that kept the spirit of the book, but also did its thing that would work in the Penny Dreadful story, and so if you're a Frankenstein fan, this episode might stand out for you. So out of all the episodes, even though there's only 3 seasons, for me, I knew I had to pick a last episode of a season, and for me, the best one had to be season 2. I think it was because, again, when I said with the day that Tennyson died, it's when you see. To me, it had the biggest cliffhanger of the season, and you see them at their lowest point, and it's what leads them to it. And they do it, I mean, they explore the actual torture of each of these characters in such a different and visual way. It's very, like Malcolm and Frankenstein are trapped in the same room, and the way that they're hallucinating is it's so similar, but it's so different, and they do it in such a visual, and the writing and the way they flip-flop back, it's like, okay, we're going to focus on Victor, we're going to focus on Malcolm, Victor, Malcolm, Victor, and you go back and forth, and it's like, it's not confusing, it just meshes perfectly, and it's so visually different as well, it's oh god, that whole torture chamber scene, I absolutely loved it. And it's also different for Vanessa when she's in the doll room, and it's different for Ethan and the situation that he's in, and it just really explored each of the characters that I absolutely loved. And that doesn't just go for the characters that are stuck in the witch's house, it's also for, Caliban, who's in the House of Wax Museum, and it's just sort of, that was an incredible moment. I mean, there's a scene when he's walking out of the museum, I won't give anything away, but I loved that moment. Just that little moment. I won't say what happens, but just that little moment. Absolutely loved it. And it's just... And it's not just exploring the characters, it's exploring the themes of the show, and just the themes of identity, and, the themes of the Frankenstein story, and it's just, it's such a wonderful episode. I can't really give any way more than that, because obviously it would be major spoilers, but honestly, it was, I was on the edge of the seat the whole time. I was invested the whole way through. It was just fantastic. Well, this is definitely a memorable episode, because of the title of the episode, The Seance. I think this was, again, what motivated me, because I just saw the trailer for it, randomly at one point, and I was like, oh, Eva Green's in it, oh, I really like Eva Green, and I was just like, oh, and it looks kind of dark and kind of my thing, I'll go for it. And the first episode I was kind of, but the Frankenstein story, I was like, oh, okay, I'm back now, and it's just kind of like, and I think this was the episode that really stated, look, this is the kind of show that you're going in for. You're gonna be amazed by it, and part of that has got to do with Eva Green's performance. God, this woman can do anything. It's just the whole sequence of the seance. I remember just watching it in silence, absolutely entranced by her performance. And then when the whole thing's done and she's storming out, I was like, oh my god, that was an awesome scene. I was just like, oh my god. It's just, I would like to know how she prepared for that. I really would love to know, because honestly, thank God they got an actress like that to do that, and honestly, I can't imagine anyone else doing that. It's just, I think she did fantastic. But the other things, the thing with the Frankenstein story in the first episode with the cliffhanger, and, all that Victor said was, my name is Frankenstein, and I was like, okay, I'm back. And then you get a little bit of Frankenstein, and you also get the introduction of Dorian Gray, another book that I have read that's seriously worth reading, and I was just like, oh, it's this kind of show, and I was just like, you know. And I think I also love this episode just because of just how visual it was and how they shoot things. I mean, the cinematography and the editing and just the filmmaking skills of the show is, like I said, it's like I'm watching a film. It does not feel like I'm watching a TV show. A very, you know, it's absolutely wonderful, and I think, you know, I think this episode really showed, like, look, this is the kind of show you're going in for. It's gonna be brilliant, you're gonna love it, and that's the reaction that I had. Ah, yes. A lot of people do say that this was probably one of the best episodes, and I agree, it probably is. That's why it's quite high on the list. And yeah, I think this was an episode that, of course, the main character is Vanessa, which is Eva Green's character. And I loved that they didn't put this episode as episode number 1. I think if they put this episode of number 1, I would have been like, okay. But the fact that they made her so mysterious, especially from that seance, like your mind is like, what, like what's going on, like all that kind of thing. This one, it explains it. So when you go back and watch the seance scene, it starts making sense. And it's just like, okay. And oh, this whole entire flashback, it's just, you know, again, they were so lucky to get an actress like Eva Green, because if they, you know, they managed to find someone who was going to be able to, you know, pull you in all the time. I think if they didn't get something like the performance that she gave, I wouldn't have been invested in her character and, you know, what happened to her, and she just carries it the whole way through. I mean, she manages to pull not just this episode, but so many episodes completely on her own. I mean, she steals the whole thing, and I'm not saying that the other actors are bad. It's just, I love the other characters, but it's just something about, you need that main character. You need someone who really could invest you into it, and she really does, and she does it in a way that you kind of feel sorry for her, you're kind of angry at her, you kind of, you know, you don't really know, like, you know, who she's trying to be, or, you know, and, you know, it's a wonderful performance, and I think this flashback, again, it explains a little bit more about it, and it sort of and the show starts to make a little bit sense, and again, the way that they visually explain it and everything like that, beautiful, absolutely beautiful. You know, I was stuck with this one. I wasn't sure if I was going to put Possession at number 4 or 3, but I think I put it at number 3 just because, for me, this was probably the most horrifying episode of all of them. I think the way it was just shot, and again, Eva Green's performance, it was something about it that just made me feel claustrophobic and made me feel uncomfortable. It made me just really, you know, terrified for not just her, but also for the rest of all the guys that are trying to help her. I mean, just seeing her in that state and the way that she flop back and forward, and it's just like, you have no idea what's going to happen. Like, I was on the edge of my seat the whole time, and it's just, you know, it was probably the most tense in the show, and I think they must have looked at that seance scene and like, okay, look, we've got a brilliant actress here, let's have a whole episode where she's like this, and that's pretty much what it was like. But oh, does she carry it through so well, and I think from just the reactions of the guys around her and everything, and you sort of find out more of the weaknesses of the other characters like Ethan and Victor and Malcolm, especially Malcolm. And I think this was definitely a interesting look at Malcolm. I think Timothy Dalton does a really good job, but I think because it was the scariest episode for me anyway, I don't know about anyone else, but it was probably the most unnerving. You know, I was on the edge of my seat, and there were some moments where I did have to look away. I'm not that squeamish, but there were a few times I was like, no. So there you go. Okay, a few reasons why Glorious Horrors is at number 2 is because, well, personally, I have a thing for ballrooms. I have a thing for just that kind of ballroom environment. Don't ask me why, I just like it. Maybe that's why I love the Cinderella story so much. Maybe that's why I like Phantom, because it has that thing. There's something about a ballroom, I don't know, I just have a thing for. So, yeah, but I think, and you know, from a visual standpoint, I mean, the way that they filmed it all and the costume design, like seeing everyone like in formal wear and just everything, I mean, it was really interesting to see that, and I absolutely loved it. But I think it was the most interesting for me because it was the one that had the characters mostly interact with each other. You know, especially like, I didn't think we were ever going to get an episode where Victor, you know, and Dorian were going to be in the same room, but oh, no, that's going to happen. And I think, you know, or, you know, I wasn't sure from the past season 1 that Vanessa was ever going to interact with Dorian again, but you know, we did, and it was, I mean, just the whole environment and the atmosphere. It had that, you know, it had that enjoyment, but that underlying darkness about it, and it was, I mean, visually it was stunning, and I thought the way that each character interacted with each other, I thought it was fine. You know, especially for something like Frankenstein and Dorian Gray, which of course are already, you know, existing characters, and yet they do manage to interact while still being the characters that I know and love. I never felt like, you know, it's just like, hey, we got Frankenstein and Dorian Gray in the same room, let's have some fun. It's just like, no, they didn't do it like that. They did it very well, and I appreciate that. So, and let's just say that the blood rain at the end of it, that was incredible. I won't give anything away more than that, but let's just say that scene was pretty incredible. So now let's look at my number 1 favorite Penny Dreadful episode. So a lot of people say that Closer Than Sisters is their favorite episode, at least the people that I talk to. But for me, A Blade of Grass is probably my favorite, because not only is because it's a flashback episode. I think the flashback episodes are absolutely beautiful, and you know, you learn a little bit more about Vanessa's character, but it's just, you know, I was worried that this was going to be like, I wasn't sure, because I heard that this was going to be an episode where it's all filmed in just this one room. And granted, this is like an hour-long episode. They're like an hour-long episode, and I wasn't quite sure how they were gonna, you know, manage that. But just the way that they filmed it, and just the way that the scenes played out, and the pacing of it, and of course the performances. I mean, again, Eva Green, she does fantastic, and the other actor, I can't really say his name, because if I do, that would be a massive spoiler. But the other actor, so for those who've seen the show, you know which one I'm talking about. He does wonderful job, and I think it's, you know, and it's that relationship from the show. It's one of the relationships from the show that I absolutely loved, and this really heightened it for me, and I absolutely loved it. And just, this was really the episode that really gives you the answers. Everything starts to make sense, and it was just, I mean, that climax, considering that it was, you know, I mean, the rest, I mean, the episode is kind of quiet, but at least you got the performances, and just the dialogue between them is wonderful, and the way that they shoot, you know, at the room at very different angles. Again, it seems more like a movie to me, but, I mean, it was wonderful, and just but the climax, oh my goodness, the amount of, you know, excitement I had, the amount of tension that was there, and just the, you know, oh, I mean, that was a beautiful, beautiful moment, and I think the whole thing was, and yes, at the end I did tear up a little bit. Again, I don't really want to spoil anything, because, you know, it's just, hopefully I explained enough to make you want to go and see the show, because honestly, it's amazing. So, but hopefully I haven't spoiled too much for you. If you want to see, again, like you said, if you want to see a different kind of review for it, then I will put the link in, as I've said, and I hope that you enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you soon. Bye!